3 major developments are taking place this August that will directly impact the finances of older Americans. None of them are optional situations. None of them leave room for negotiation. And not a single one of them is being communicated clearly to the very people who are most affected by them. I want to be upfront with you from the beginning. This is not the kind of video where I string you along with fuzzy warnings. Could be this, could be that, or some distant possibility that might materialize if Washington decides to shift direction. No, the developments I'm describing are already in motion. 2 of them are already touching seniors at this very moment. And the third one carries an August deadline that far too many people will simply miss because no one bothered to explain it to them in straightforward language. That is the actual problem here. If you collect Social Security, if you rely on Medicare, if you are stretching a fixed income from one month to the next, then even minor shifts in the system do not stay minor for very long. A delay turns into a missed payment. A missed payment becomes a late charge. A late charge becomes a downward spiral. A benefit complication becomes a full emergency. And once that emergency begins, it is always more difficult, more drawn out, and more costly to untangle than it ever should have been. So today I'm going to walk through all 3 of these developments one by one. What each one involves, why it carries real weight, who takes the hardest hit, and precisely what you need to watch for before August delivers an unwelcome financial surprise. And before we dive into the first one, let me say something directly. The people most likely to get burned by these changes are not irresponsible people. They are not people who cut corners. They are people who do everything correctly, who stay informed, and who still get caught off guard because the rules shifted quietly around them while they were focused on simply getting through their daily lives. That is what makes this so important. The first serious change is one that sounds like bureaucratic fine print, right up until it happens to you personally. Social Security has significantly tightened its identity verification process, and for a large number of seniors, what was once a routine account task can now become a locked door with no obvious way through. If you have ever logged into your account, updated your direct deposit, confirmed your payment details, or reviewed your benefit records for accuracy, then you already understand just how important account access truly is. Now picture this. The system requires you to prove your identity through a process that demands a smartphone, a functioning camera, a reliable internet connection, a photo identification card that registers properly when scanned, and a comfortable familiarity with digital technology that a significant portion of older Americans simply does not possess. That is precisely where the difficulty begins, because the moment you cannot clear that verification step, everything else comes to a halt. You cannot confirm whether your banking details are still accurate. You cannot review whether any adjustments have been made to your benefits. You cannot determine whether someone has interfered with your account. You cannot easily dispute or correct an error if one appears. And if that lockout occurs at the wrong moment, the situation is not merely frustrating. It can become genuinely dangerous to your financial stability. That is the piece that most people completely overlook. This is not simply a matter of logging in. This is about maintaining control over your own benefits. When account access becomes more difficult, you end up relying entirely on the system performing flawlessly every single time. And the instant something does go wrong, you are the one left waiting, re-verifying, resubmitting documents, attempting the process again, or calling back later while a growing stack of complications continues to pile up behind you. Many seniors tell themselves they will handle it when the situation actually demands it. That is precisely the wrong mindset, because the demand does not arrive politely. It arrives when a payment fails to appear. It arrives when a bank account detail has been changed. It arrives when a deposit figure does not match what it should be. It arrives when someone has attempted to access your account without permission. And if you are not already prepared before that moment hits, you lose time you simply cannot afford to lose. So the first action I want you to take is straightforward. If you already have a Social Security account, sign in right now and confirm that everything still functions properly. Do not postpone it until you actually need it. Do not assume it is working just because it functioned correctly several months ago. Test it today. Verify your direct deposit information. Confirm that your mailing address, contact number, and banking details are all still exactly as they should be. And if you have not yet created an account, set one up before you ever find yourself in a position where you urgently need it. That step might feel tedious right now. It might feel like something that is not really necessary at this moment. It might feel like one of those tasks you keep telling yourself you will get around to eventually. But eventually is precisely when people find themselves trapped. Eventually is when the problem has already taken root. Eventually is when every single minute becomes critical. The first change is dangerous because it creates a barrier at the moment you need access most. The second one is dangerous because it creates a barrier at the moment you need resolution most. Social Security is operating more slowly than it previously did. Not marginally slower, but noticeably, measurably slower. And for seniors who depend on timely responses and prompt corrections, that slowdown translates directly into real money lost, real pressure added, and real hold-ups that never should have occurred in the first place. When staffing levels decline, every process becomes more difficult. Hold times on the phone stretch longer. Local offices take more time to handle requests. Corrections require additional processing time. Applications wait in longer queues. Appeals take more time to reach someone. And the people doing that waiting are not simply being inconvenienced. They are waiting on income, on answers, on corrections, on decisions that determine whether they can cover their bills for the current month. That is precisely why this second change carries so much significance. A processing delay is not a minor inconvenience when the money being held up is meant to cover groceries, prescriptions, housing, or monthly utilities. A delay is not a trivial matter when the issue involves an overpayment that is already reducing the size of a monthly check. A delay is not something that can simply be waited out when the agency itself has made an error, and the person affected is living with those consequences every single day while waiting for a resolution. The most troubling part is that many of these problems do not appear dramatic from the outside looking in. No alarm sounds. No bold notice appears in your benefit statement. No one sends you a clear message warning you that your case is about to sit untouched in a processing queue for weeks or possibly months. Instead, what you receive is silence. Silence on the phone line. Silence on your file. Silence while your concern waits to be reviewed by someone who may already be overwhelmed, stretched thin, or buried somewhere inside a system that simply cannot keep pace with the volume it is handling. And when that happens, seniors are the ones who feel it most acutely. If you are contacting Social Security about any kind of issue, do not treat that call as though it is a casual conversation. Call early in the day, call fully prepared, write down the names of every representative you speak with, along with the times of your calls and any reference numbers you are given. Keep copies of every document that pertains to your case. If the matter is significant, follow it up in writing so that a clear paper trail exists. If anything in your record appears incorrect, do not sit back and assume the system will eventually catch and fix it on its own. It very well might not. That is one of the harder truths that has to be acknowledged here. In a system that is already running slowly, your own self-advocacy carries more weight than it ever has before. You must be the one who monitors the problem, documents every step, and maintains consistent pressure until the issue reaches an actual resolution. That does not require being confrontational. It requires being persistent. It means refusing to allow your file to sink into a pile and simply hoping that someone eventually notices it. Because in a slowed-down system, the person who keeps following through is consistently the person most likely to see movement on their case. Now let us get to the third change, because this is the one that tends to catch people completely off guard in an entirely different way. It does not present itself like a scam. It does not necessarily appear as a dramatic reduction in benefits. Instead, it quietly adjusts the cost of your medical care, modifies what is actually covered under your plan, or changes which doctors and medications you assumed would remain constant. What I am referring to is Medicare Advantage coverage. Many seniors operate under the assumption that once they have selected a Medicare Advantage plan, the hard part is finished for that year. They enroll, receive their card, begin using their benefits, and expect everything to remain consistent until the next open enrollment cycle arrives. But that assumption can turn out to be a very expensive one. Medicare Advantage plans are permitted to change their covered benefits, adjust their medication formularies, alter their provider networks, and modify how much members pay for particular services throughout the year. What appeared stable at the start of January may look very different by the middle of the year. And by August, people who have not gone back to review their plan specifics can be completely caught off guard by a higher prescription cost, a physician who has left their network, or a benefit they counted on that no longer operates the way it once did. That is exactly how this one lands. It rarely arrives with any dramatic announcement. It arrives in the form of a bill. One day your prescription is comfortably affordable, and then the next time you go to refill it, the cost has jumped significantly. One day your physician is fully in network, and then the receptionist informs you the plan has changed. One day your supplemental benefits are intact, and then the card or allowance you had been depending on is smaller, restructured, or restricted in ways that were never clearly communicated to you. And because a large number of people do not thoroughly read every notice that comes from their insurance plan, the change goes unnoticed until the cost is already sitting right in front of them. That is the danger built into quiet, gradual change. It does not always look like an emergency until you are already the one absorbing the financial impact. This is precisely why August represents such a critical window. People are already settled into the routine of the year. They are already relying on the plan they selected. They are already counting on the same physician appointments, the same medications, the same supplemental perks, the same rules they have been working with all year. That is exactly the moment when an unannounced change can do the most damage, because no one is actively watching for it. So here is what you need to go and verify right now. Pull up the medication list associated with your current plan and hold it next to the list of prescriptions you actually take. Do not take for granted that your medications are still categorized and priced the same way they were earlier in the year. Check whether any of them have been moved to a higher and more expensive coverage tier. Confirm whether the pharmacy you regularly use is still covered under the same terms. Verify whether the rules surrounding refills or preferred pharmacy designations have been updated or changed. Then reach out directly to your physician's office and simply ask the question, "Are you still participating in my Medicare Advantage Plans network?" Do not guess at the answer. Do not convince yourself it is probably still fine. Do not rely on what you recall from a previous conversation. Ask explicitly. Because if that office is no longer inside your network, you need to find out now, not after you have already paid for an appointment that ended up costing far more than you anticipated. After that, go back and read every piece of mail that arrived from your insurance plan over the past 30 days. Do not set it aside because the envelope looks routine. Do not assume it is merely a general informational mailing. A significant number of people miss the most consequential details simply because the correspondence does not look urgent from the outside. That is exactly how these changes slip past people unnoticed. And if you discover that something has changed in a way that affects either your costs or your access to care, document it immediately. Keep the original notice. Save the dates. Write down the name of every person you spoke with and what was discussed. If a special enrollment period becomes available to you as a result of a genuine plan modification, that documentation may become critically important down the road. Now take a step back and consider the broader pattern at work here. The first change makes access more difficult. The second change makes problem resolution take longer. The third change makes healthcare more expensive. That is why these three belong in the same conversation. They operate within different systems, but they produce the same fundamental effect. All three of them penalise the people who assume that yesterday's rules still apply today. And that is precisely the assumption that could make this August an unusually costly one. The seniors most likely to suffer real harm are not the ones engaging in reckless behaviour. They are the ones who assumed the letter would arrive on schedule. The ones who assumed the call centre would respond promptly. The ones who assumed the plan would stay exactly as it was. The ones who assumed the prescription would remain affordable. The ones who assumed the doctor would still be covered. The ones who assumed the account would function normally when they needed it most. That kind of assumption is completely understandable. It is also genuinely risky because systems do not always fail in obvious or dramatic ways. Sometimes they simply become harder to navigate. Sometimes they take considerably longer. Sometimes they charge considerably more. Sometimes they quietly shift the entire burden onto the person who is least positioned to absorb it. That is why this particular month should not be treated carelessly. If you are collecting Social Security, invest 10 minutes to confirm that your account access is fully functional. If you have an unresolved matter with Social Security, stop waiting for the system to handle it without your involvement. Follow up on it, document every step, and keep pushing forward. If you are enrolled in Medicare Advantage, take time to verify your physicians, your prescriptions, and your coverage details before the month slips away from you entirely. These are not complicated actions, they are practical ones, but practical actions are what genuinely protect you when changes happen quietly around you. Let me say the uncomfortable part clearly. Much of the harm that occurs in these situations does not stem from one catastrophic error, but from small delays and minor oversights that accumulate gradually over time. A login problem that could have been resolved weeks earlier, a phone call that should have been placed sooner, a notice that deserved to be opened rather than placed in a pile, a physician that should have been confirmed rather than simply assumed to be fine, a prescription that should have been reviewed before the refill became unaffordable. That is the true pattern of how the damage unfolds. Not in a single moment, but layer by layer, piece by piece. And once the damage is already there, undoing it consistently takes far longer than preventing it ever would have required. So do not sit and wait for the ideal moment to take action. That ideal moment may never actually arrive. Log into your Social Security account today. Confirm your direct deposit is still accurate. Review every piece of correspondence from both Social Security and Medicare. Ask the questions that genuinely matter. Keep your paperwork organized and accessible. And if something looks wrong, act on it immediately. Because in August, the people who pay close attention early are consistently the ones most likely to avoid the worst outcomes of what is unfolding right now. And that is simply the honest reality. 3 changes are in play. 1 has the potential to lock you out of your own account. 1 has the potential to slow every resolution to accrual. 1 has the potential to cost you significantly more money. Together they create a level of risk that far too many seniors will not recognize until the damage has already taken hold. Do not allow yourself to be one of those people. If you are a senior, or if someone you love is, this is the month to get ahead of all of it. Open the notice, make the call, check the account, confirm the coverage. Stop assuming the old system is still performing exactly the way it once did. Because this August, it is the quiet changes, the ones that do not announce themselves, that are the most likely to cause real and lasting harm.